Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. It means in English translation, I openly bear witness and give testimony that there's nothing worthy of worship or praise but Allah. Allah is the one who created the semi-wati wal ardi, the heavens and the earth, or space, and everything that exists in space. Again, I greet you with the greetings of all the prophets. Assalamu alaikum, alhamdulillah, la ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar. Tonight, believers, our topic is, it's a topic that we've dealt with before. We're going to go into a little bit more detail, and I believe it's very important. It's a very important subject because it helps us to understand ourselves a little better, and because that's the whole purpose in life. To if we want to get it right, if we want to go back to the Jannah where we came from, then we have to understand what we're made up of, and how we ought to train ourselves to get back to the destiny, which is the Jannah. So alhamdulillah, la ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar. We're gonna go ahead and get started because we're starting a little late. And the topic is you're gonna be dealing with let's share the screen. The myth, the ego, the myth of Narcissus. Okay. And we talked last week, we talked about the ego. I think what I'll do, I'll begin with that. Because last week we dealt with the Quran, invites us to think. And within that conversation we had last week, we mentioned the aspects of the mind, the 4 aspects of the mind. And these, the 4 categories of the mind are manas, chitta, ahimkara, and buddhi. The 4 mental faculties that yoga seeks to develop to enable us to experience the world. These 4 mental processes cooperate with one another. Okay. And this is not the main topic, but one of these aspects of the mind is the ego. And we're going to get a little bit, go deeper into the ego. What is the ego? The 4 are manas, chitta, ahimkara, and buddhi. And buddhi is the highest level of the soul. Buddhi is like the level of the prophets, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is when the soul has developed the capacities that Allah gave it to enter back into the Jannah. When he has all of its, when the intellect has all of the aspects of his soul organized and coordinated and working as one unit, then that's the highest level of the prophets. And if you notice, that word buddhi is associated with Buddha, the Buddha. And the Buddha really means Jesus Christ was a buddhi. It's just a different language. Christ is said to have developed into the Christ consciousness. Christ consciousness is also Buddha, a buddhi. Prophet Muhammad was a Buddha, if you want to use that language. So that's the highest level of the soul, the enlightened being, put it like that, the enlightened being. The first level we're dealing with the sensory mind is that mind that engages the material world and receives the information and the signals and the signs from the material world. And the chitta, the second level, is that storage capacity. All of these images that the mind receives through the five senses are stored in a memory bank. It's called chitta. And the next thing is ahamkara, which is the ego. The ego, we're gonna deal with the ego. We're gonna deal with it. This whole presentation is about the ego. So let me go to another. Now, the ego, the myth of Narcissus. We know Imam Muhammad dealt with this Narcissus. There's a story. It's a myth. It says every ego has strong narcissistic elements in it. The earliest story about the rising of the ego is the myth of Narcissus. This is the story of a young man in the ancient Greece who was very beautiful. This was a time before mirrors were invented. Now remember, this is a myth. It's used to tell a story of how the ego operates, what it's made up of, etc. He had never seen himself. One day he looked into a pool of water and he saw his own reflection. And he was so fascinated by his own reflection, the story says that he fell in love with himself. He became obsessed with himself, but not really with himself, but with the image of himself. Okay. After that, he was no longer a happy person. His life did not go well after that. There's very deep wisdom embodied in mythology and myth. What it points to is the rising of the human ego, which is a kind of phantom self that you carry around and which you mistake for who you actually are. The ego consists of identifications with possessions, with your own body, including the color of your skin. You identify with things you can do and things you know. Identification. That means you derive your sense of self from something that is not you. This is mine. It enhances a certain sense of identity. Identity is something humans desperately need. We need to identify with something. Complete identification with thoughts. Who is the one who either loves or hates the self? Think about it. The ego is a mental construct that you mistake for who you are. So you could say that the ego is complete identification with thoughts. And remember last week we talked about thoughts and thinking. The beginning of spiritual awakening is to realize that certain thoughts are continuously arising in your mind. For a moment, you have stepped out of thought. There's an underlying sense of presence, of a live conscious presence. There is a dimension of consciousness in you that is not thinking, but just conscious. And that is your essence identity, your consciousness. The ego seeks superiority. It only works when others don't have what you have. The ego needs to feel that it is better than the next person. I don't take this personally, y'all, but we should take it personally. I'm gonna read something Imam Muhammad said about this. Try to relate this, we're talking about the ego related to what's happening within. What have you observed about yourself that you can relate to what we're talking about here? The ego seeks superiority. It compares itself to others. This is an unconscious process. The ego never feels at ease or fulfilled. This is my life. I hate my life. I love myself. This is a split of the self. There is you, and there is the self that you either hate or love. Who are you? Who are you? The ego is the mind's identity of our own construction, an identity that is false. We are more than just the mind and the ego. If we take all of the beliefs of what we are, beliefs about our personality, talents, and abilities, we have the structure of our ego. These talents, abilities, and aspects of our personality will be attributes of our own skills, but the mental construct of ourself is artificial. And while this description might make the ego seem like a static thing, it is not. Rather, it is an active and dynamic part of our personalities, playing an immense role in creating emotional drama in our lives. Now, what is the ego again? In the context of yoga philosophy, the term ego refers to the individualized sense of self, or I, that is often associated with one's identity, personality, and personal attachments. It is the part of our consciousness that differentiates us from others and creates a sense of separateness. The ego is driven by our thoughts, desires, fears, and attachments, leading to a perceived division between ourselves and the rest of the world. The ego is seen as a source of suffering and a barrier to spiritual growth and enlightenment. This is because the ego tends to create a false sense of identity and keeps us attached to material desires and worldly concerns. These attachments can lead to various forms of suffering as we become entangled in the cycles of pleasure and pain. According to yoga philosophy, the ultimate goal is to transcend the ego and realize our true nature, which is beyond the limited identification with the self. This realization is often described as self-realization or self-discovery, where the individual connects with the deeper, unchanging aspect of the self that is connected to the universal consciousness or higher self. Now, this is the key point that we want to understand here. If you can observe your thoughts, what is observing the thoughts? What part of you is observing your actions? So that means that so that's something above the thinking and the actions. That is the deeper self, the unchanging aspect of the self that is connected to the universal consciousness or higher consciousness. That's Allah's ruh, okay? Very important. So if you can really just do some introspection, you are the same person that you were at 5 years old, 10 years old, etc. Okay. Everything was changing though. Everything else changing. You're growing. You know, you're gaining more information and memory and experiences. But there's an aspect of yourself that was observing that whole process, and it never changed. You're the same person, but not really the same person, because physically and mentally there was a change. You were actually observing this process, observing this change. You see? So there's an aspect of you in us that has always been there and will always be. Okay. What is the ego? Practices such as meditation, mindfulness, self-inquiry, and detachment from worldly attachments are employed to help individuals break free from the grip of the ego and experience a state of oneness and inner peace. By doing so, practitioners can attain a sense of unity with all beings and the universe, leading to a more fulfilled and harmonious life. Okay. So that's the goal. That's the goal. And it said that the ego is what keeps us from achieving that. But the goal is to get that ego to surrender and work with the program. You remember in the Jannah when Allah put Adam or the Caliph in charge, and he told everybody who was there to bow down to Adam. Iblis refused, and that Iblis is associated with the ego. Okay, we're gonna get into that a little bit too later. The ego hides behind the I and the me. When we have thoughts about ourselves that we agree with, we construct a self-image within our self-awareness. The kinds of thoughts that contribute to the structure are: I am not good at math. These are the thoughts we're having about ourselves. I am smart. My freckles make me ugly. I'm better than you. That was stupid of me. The ego hides behind the I and me and those declarative thoughts and statements about our identity. Self-image. When we have such thoughts and agree with even the slightest conviction that these thoughts define us, then we are building or reinforcing an ego. Okay. And don't get me wrong, ego is an essential aspect of that's in our soul that helps us to grow. It gives us it gives us a challenge, put it like that. We first have these thoughts when we are kids, perhaps when we were teased on the playground, or when reprimanded by or praised by teacher or parent. In all cultures, developing a self-image is a normal part of socialization. Problems arise, however, when that self-image is negative, inaccurate, or even overly positive. Considering that we develop our concept of self as children, it is inevitable that our self-image doesn't map to reality as adults. And this is what Imam Muhammad said about it. This was in the Ramadan session, 2006, page 5 of 17. He said, then Allah addressed the man that he was making or forming in the earth. He said, Adam, tell them their names. And when Adam told them their names, they all submitted except Iblis, the proud ego. Remember, Iblis is associated with the ego. Proud and defiant ego. Abba wastakbara. He resisted. He refused to do what Allah asked him to do and was puffed up in pride. Isn't that the nature of some of us? You wanted to be relevant. Imam Muhammad is saying, you wanted to be relevant? Then don't look where you can't see it and do not know what is happening. Look at yourself and each other where it's happening all of the time. There's some arrogant spirit all the time defying the will of God or Allah down here. Now, We're going to get a little deeper. This is in Surah 7, Ayat 12. Allah said, what prevented you from prostrating when I commanded you, when I commanded you? Shaitan said, I am better than him. You created me from fire and you created him from clay. Allah said, then get down from it, for it is not for you to be arrogant therein. So get out. Indeed, you are of the disgraced. Surah 2, Ayat 34. And when we said to the angels, prostrate to Adam, they prostrated except Iblis. He refused and was arrogant and became of the disbelievers. This is Surah 2, Ayat 35 through 36. We cautioned, O Adam, live with your wife in the paradise and eat as freely as you please, but do not approach this tree or else will be wrongdoers. 36. But Shaitan, now, we can clearly show the correlation between Iblis, ego, or matter, jinn, or fajur. We can completely show that correlation. The Shaitan deceived them, leading to their fall from the blissful state they were in. And Jannah is a state of consciousness in the soul. Therefore, it is possible to be in a blissful state of Jannah, which is heaven, while on earth. And we said, descend from the heavens to the earth as enemies to each other. You will find in the earth a residence and provision for your appointed stay. And you're going to identify with the body, forgetting your heavenly origin. Idem that's a Latin word that means to make the same as I. I is the ego. The ego is bipolar. The ego moving between two polarities of desire and fear. Now, we talked about the tree, right? Shajara. The actual definition of that tree in the Arabic dictionary. It's a tree. Now, shajara is a tree. The affair or case became complicated and confused as to be a subject of disagreement and difference that has happened between them. All of this is associated with the formation of the ego or the jinn or the iblis or the shaitan. This is Surah 45, Ayat 17. This is a Sahih International. And we gave them clear proofs of the matter of religion, and they did not differ except after knowledge had come to them out of jealous animosity between themselves. Indeed, your Lord will judge between them on the day of resurrection concerning that over which they used to differ. So we see the jealousy and animosity, it comes from the ego, right? Okay, but what brought about that? The knowledge. As soon as knowledge comes, you start arguing and debating. If you don't have any knowledge, you don't have anything to debate about. You don't have anything to see that you're differing in. Okay. So we associate the tree with knowledge. And when the knowledge came, there was the split, the differing. You see? Hold 1 second. Yeah, so sorry. So now, I hope we can, and we can ask questions afterwards. But this is very important. I believe it's very important. I believe it brings about connections. That if we see the connections and start utilizing the understanding of this to make changes in our lives, then we can make progress. Again, Imam Muhammad said that we need to make it relevant. We need to be able to relate it to our lives. We don't just read this stuff in the Quran. Everything in the Quran is pointing directly to you and to me. I read the Quran and say, oh yeah, that's what he's not doing. He's not doing what he's supposed to do. No, look at yourself and see what you're supposed to be doing and do it. And maybe you will be an influence, an inspiration to him, and he may start following you and doing what you do. Don't point him out because it's something you ain't doing too. So this Quran, this religion, knowledge is a medicine to apply on ourselves. And we don't get somebody, like you look like giving somebody else some medicine. They might not want your medicine. You gonna force it on them? Do it on yourself. Apply it to yourself. Then maybe he'll say, wow, look at the change that brought about in this person. So maybe he'll shield. Kingdom of heaven is within you. How many times we heard that? Can we relate that? We don't, the mind can't believe that. Kingdom of heaven is within you. And I see all of this crazy, stuff. Kingdom of heaven is the transcendent level. Realizing the transcendent dimension of who you are. Sunyata, emptiness, spaciousness is the essence of who you are. Jesus said that the kingdom of heaven is within you. The literal translation for heaven is space or sky. It's a dimension of consciousness. It's the essence of who you are. Now, really, your essence, I said earlier, who was aware, who was conscious of yourself going through the changes? Looking back at yourself at 4 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old, when you got married, when you had children. That's the same consciousness observing that. It never changed. Consciousness don't change. That's from Allah's ruh, which is eternal. It's a dimension of consciousness. It's the essence of who you are. You don't have anything, when this body grows old and drops away, all that stuff that you were so proud of, how you looked, how much money you had, I'm just putting it bluntly. The children you raised, beautiful children, all that stuff gonna pass away. But the essence of who you are is consciousness. Okay? You are the microcosm, the small model, and the cosmos is the macrocosm, the big model. That's why, everything, that refers to the view that there is a structural similarity between the human being and the cosmos as a whole. The universe is realizing its own essence through you. Now, the mind can't handle that. It has to be dealt with the soul. The soul has to experience that. Now, we talked about this reconciled soul, talking about the Buddha. We're talking about Jesus or the Christ consciousness. We're talking about Muhammad, the prophet. All of them was on this level. They had reached Jannah. I believe Imam Muhammad had reached Jannah before he passed away in the physical world. The reconciled soul, El Mutmaina. So we had to go through that process. All of this stuff is connected. There's not an aspect of Islam or knowledge that you can't find a connection for with something else because it's connected. Emancipation from hell. This is the soul, nafs el mutmaina. Yeah, tuhan nafsul mutmaina. It will be said to the righteous soul, return to your Lord, well pleased and pleasing. The soul that is in complete rest and satisfaction enters paradise, well pleased and well pleasing. The soul that has been reconciled, this soul has reconciled its fajura nature with its taqwa nature. They have become one again. Okay. And that's the end of the presentation. I'm going to stop the share. and